Castle on the Coast is an enchanting fairy tale about, well, a castle on the coast. The castle was once a refuge for powerful wizards and their children, a safe haven from the outside world's suffering and misery. Unfortunately, the wizards were forced into action one day when a mythical monster appeared and threatened the entire world. The wizards abandoned their ivory towers to do battle, and though they were victorious, they lost their lives in the struggle, never to return. The player takes the role of George the Giraffe, a pure-hearted explorer, as he delves deeply into the wizards' old castle, uncovers their secrets, and brings joy to the orphans they'd left behind. The core gameplay is simple in spirit but complex in execution. You traverse the many worlds and chambers inside the castle, gradually uncovering its mysteries and collectibles so you can finally proceed to its most obscure reaches. You might have noticed already, but the traversal is the fun part. George jumps, and oh boy, does he jump. He puts the platformer in 3D platformer. The movement in Castle on the Coast is so spectacularly enjoyable that I struggle to quantify or qualify it. It's basically press jump to feel good, the video game. Chaining moves like spins, dives, rolls, and wall jumps together is so accessible and immediately rewarding that it'd be extremely hard to ruin. Every aspect of the level design would have to be hell-bent on sucking the joy from this giraffe's insane parkour, and even then it would still be a Herculean task. Thankfully, as is generally the case, the level design seeks to work with the movement rather than oppose it. It seeks to give us the best of both worlds, simultaneously providing an easy way forward for traditional players and children, while also allowing for fancy footwork and impressive level skips for the daredevils out there. You choose how you play, and there's an impressively high skill ceiling. You may think, based on that glowing description, that Castle on the Coast has everything in the bag. It's unbelievably fun just to move, the level design encourages exploration of the game's absurd parkour mechanics, and we get to play as a giraffe, which is almost as good as a horse. Well, believe it or not, there are some complications outside the movement and level design that intrude on our gameplay, namely vehicle sections. Now, to be fair, not only do the vehicles control well, but most of them speak to a positive bias of mine. Rolly ball segment? Hell yes, I love rolly ball segments. That's probably my favorite secondary movement mechanic in any platformer. Driving segment with rocket boosters? Baby, I was born to drive fictional, and exclusively fictional, stunt cars. With that disclaimer of my bias out of the way, I can still safely say that the vehicles don't intrude much on the general game design. Would the game have been better and tighter focused without the vehicles? Yes, absolutely. But most platformer developers feel the need to introduce external variety in one way or another, and you could do a lot worse. There is one exception. There's a vehicle so obnoxious to control and antithetical to enjoyment that it feels mandated by some unseen corporate shadow lord, the submarine. Thankfully, it's entirely optional, but it's still an obtrusive black mark on the experience. So, we've established the gameplay is almost as beautiful as it could possibly be, but what about the presentation and narrative? I can say that I, personally, was deeply enamored with the fantasy world, mysticism, and surreal atmosphere. I got a sense of wonder and majesty from the environments that I haven't felt since Floating Runner. It's like living in a fairy tale, where one step through a stained glass window transports us to unimaginable, ethereal landscapes for our visceral visual delight. As to the narrative, it may genuinely be my favorite part of the experience. Not only is the story about helping people, which I'm generally a big fan of, but there's a surprising amount of emotional depth to the characters. After all, leaving behind orphans is bound to create some serious emotional scars, and this game approaches that subject with an equally wholesome and respectful passion. I don't want to spoil too much, but it almost reminds me of Coraline, a warm-hearted subversion of what we believe is good and bad, tinted with coming-of-age sensibilities and effortless charm, though Castle on the Coast is noticeably less horror-themed, of course. Overall, it's probably no surprise that I think Castle on the Coast is fantastic. Spectacular, even. The bee's knees. I strongly recommend giving it a look if you're a fan of movement-heavy platforming shenaniganry and cute hooved critters. Hey, it's the end of the video. Did you know I have a Patreon? It's true. If you grab certain tiers there, you can directly influence what content I make next. Or you can just offer general support. Both are lovely, and some equally lovely people are already signed up. People I will list for you now. My wonderful supporters are iPompous, Anonymous, Jay, Marth Sinclair, Mighty Minimalist Power Rangers, Sam Anderson, and Some Call Me Anto. A link to the Patreon is in the description. Thank you all so much for your time and thoughts, and I'll talk to you in the next video.